All right, I think we're going to start this webinar off here. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Welcome to the November webinar on equipping sales and executives for briefing success. We appreciate everybody joining us today, and I'm delighted to have each and all of you here for a truly engaging and informative webinar. So today you're going to be hearing and learning how world-class programs are leveraging relationship with executive teams and sales leaders to maximize customer engagement. So with the help of our esteemed leaders on this webinar, we'll have the opportunity to delve into the depths of customer engagements. So with that being said, I did want to introduce our distinguished speakers for the next hour. So helping me co-host and provide expert knowledge for today's topic, we have Pam Evans, and she is the principal and consultant of GoPro Briefings, which is a highly renowned company helping EBCs achieve world-class programs. So Pam, thanks so much for being here. I know that you were on another one of our webinars earlier this year, so we appreciate you being back, and we would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Oh, thank you so much. For those of you who don't know me, I am Pam Evans, and I was a briefing professional for many years, like most of you. And I ran global programs in all stages of development, even during the onset of COVID. So I lived in the virtual world like you as well. Right now, our company provides training and consulting for briefing leaders and teams. And if we haven't had a chance to work with you, I hope we get to, but I'm really happy to be on this webinar with all of you and to work with Ali, Andy, and Naomi and sharing some tips and tools on how to better equip sales and sales leadership and your executives so they're going to be more involved in your programs.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Pam. So next up, we have Andy Garlikov. He is the Customer Insights and Engagement Consultant with many, many years of experience. He focuses on helping companies better serve their customers and their market. So Andy, we're thrilled to have you here. I know that you were also a panelist a while ago as well. So we thank you for being back. And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves to our viewers.
I would be happy to, Alessandra. I'm happy to be here with everybody. Andy Garlikov. I have worked both on the front lines and in management of a couple of different briefing programs at different stages. Today, I leverage my innate curiosity and experience in marketing engagement to help companies gain a deeper understanding of their customers, to uncover business opportunities. My work includes developing and implementing programs that establish durable and trusting relationships with customers. And I work through research firms, through marketing agencies, and work directly with brands. And Naomi's up next.
Thanks, Andy. All right. And last but not least, we have Naomi Price. She is the SVP of Global Accounts at Mandel, which is powered by Vantage Partners. So Naomi helps organizations advance through the power of communication, collaboration, and alignment. So we are thankful that you're here today. And I know that you've also were a co-host a few months ago, and now you're a panelist. So thank you for switching roles and providing your feedback to all of us here. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to our audience, we'd love to hear a little bit about you.
Absolutely, Ali, thank you. I have been a supplier member of ABPM for over 18 years now, and our superpower is helping the very, very smart who are dealing with a lot of complex information, distill and communicate that information so that other people can make better decisions faster. And that absolutely includes the salespeople who are bringing their guests to your briefing programs and the executives who are both influencing the budget that you get for your briefing program and often speaking as subject matter experts and executive leaders in your briefing program. So absolutely focusing today on the behavioral side of the context.
Perfect. Thank you guys for all the introductions. So I'm really excited to hear all the unique perspectives for our discussion. So making this webinar an invaluable opportunity for all of us to learn and grow. So throughout the webinar, we do encourage active participation. So please feel free to ask any questions. You can submit them in the chat feature or the Q&A feature. We're going to be monitoring all that. So we will definitely do our best to address all of those questions during this session. So before we embark on this learning journey, I did want to get the audience involved. So I'm going to start by displaying a few poll questions. There's just 2 of them. So please feel free to participate. They're just 2 questions. So I'll go ahead and display them, and then we can go ahead and provide the answers. So give me a moment and I will launch them. Okay, so you guys should be able to see this. you guys can see, which is one of the questions, right? How would you characterize your executives' preparedness for briefing success? So who am I? Why am I here? Manic Monday, walking a tightrope, smooth sailing. Give you guys a few more seconds here. All right, I'll go ahead and end this poll here in about 5 seconds. All right, so I'm going to share the results now. So it looks like 4% Manic Monday. So my executives might be awake, but they still need their coffee. And then we have 40% walking a tightrope. Executives make it across, but they're not always ready. And then 36% is smooth sailing. My leaders participate in a briefing and it works. So thank you guys for sharing that. And then let's go back. We'll launch the other question, which is how would you characterize your salespeople's preparedness for briefing success? So never prepared, procrastination, not nearly efficient, pretty good, or amazing. Give us a few more seconds. All right, I'll end this poll and give you guys the results. So it looks like 4% are never prepared. 21% procrastination is always a problem. 29% not nearly efficient, but eventually we get there. 46% is pretty good with room for improvement. And then we don't have anybody with a flawless preparedness.
If we did, they could be teaching that. They could be
Yeah,
leading.
that would be great. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everybody for participating in the poll question. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Pam so she can start the webinar portion.
Oh, great. In that first poll, I had to laugh because I never had a Manic Monday. It looks like most of you haven't either. But I had a frantic Friday once when I had a very formal luncheon and the senior leader strolled in late and was distracted. It was a disaster. So, and he'd been prepped. So anything can happen in the briefing world. But anyway, today we're here to talk about how to help equip salespeople and sales leadership so they can support you better, and all the other executives in the organizations that work with you. So we're going to talk a little bit about readiness, but before we do that, I want to ask Andy, because he's managed many programs. First off, you have to build leadership trust. And you have to prove the value of the program so they will be involved and they will support you on a consistent, regular basis. What are some of the things that you have done to gain that trust in leadership, particularly when you were a new leader in a program?
Sure, great question, Pam. I think when you say demonstrate value, it's about communicating value. And there's two ways to do that generally. First is, and again, as a research guy now, I think about qualitative, quantitative, but really it's about stories and it's about data or metrics. On the story side, I think about the ways that other parts of the company communicate to executives or communicate to customers and use those frameworks. So it's not, to me, effective just to brag about how well your program does, but rather tell stories internally, externally, and even if the EBC is not the hero of that story, it's part of it. And it's by showcasing how executives, how their fellow leaders, how other folks at the company have made a difference through working with customers as part of the briefing program. That can be really compelling. And again, I'd look at like what your customer advocacy program does and use the kind of frameworks that they do, because those are things that probably work in your company. if folks are already using those sorts of tools. You're just pivoting from talking to customers to talking to your internal customers. The second thing, metrics, data. Folks respond to business results. And of course, by saying this, we go to the old joke that you can't have two briefing folks in the same county and not talk about metrics. But I'll break it down really quickly the way I think about metrics that make a difference to leaders in the company. The first and easiest one to talk about are activity metrics, what you did. We saw this many customers, we held this many briefings. That's fine. You know, that's an important precursor to results. The second is perception. I mean, we all do our surveys. One of my former colleagues is on the line, and we talked about them quite a bit at our program. But I think rather than just perception of what the customer thinks, to be able to show leaders what kind of change in perception that you created, and not necessarily with one person at 8 a.m. versus 5 p.m., but over time, the difference, and whether you use a net promoter score or a 5-point survey, looking at how, rather than just those raw numbers, look at the change you create, look at the alignment between the perception of internal folks and customers, of the question of when you can show to executives, hey, how did this, was this briefing a good use of your time? And both the customers and your discussion leaders are aligned that it was. That's more powerful than everyone giving it, a thumbs up. And finally, the most important, and we know the hardest thing to do, are results metrics. And that's what everyone's looking for, like what difference did things make? And there's different ways to slice and dice that, most of which require a lot of work with your CRM system and a lot of participation from your account teams. But it's doable, and incorporating those into the stories you tell, I think, shows leaders that the briefing program has an impact, and exactly, what kind of impact that is. Did that answer your question, Pam?
Yeah, definitely. And as far as the win stories go, I have seen them highlighted at all hands meetings. And that's a real boost for your EBC or customer engagement program. But you've got to get those stories to the executives, the win stories. I used to ask executives, how would you like to receive information, whether it be win stories, testimonials, feedback, metrics. And I actually once worked with the president of a company to come up with a template that he and E-staff wanted to see at the end of each week, that just very specific things. And one of the last questions was, how can we as executives follow up with sales teams and customers who came in that week? Because not all executives can be in all briefings. But yes, definitely results, metrics, and win stories are really important in helping to build trust in your program and helping to demonstrate the value of it. So I think that's great. And if anybody has any ideas in chat, in addition to what Andy has talked about, please feel free to share. Allie is watching the chat, and she can bring anything up that we haven't. So that's good, Andy. Thanks a lot about that. As far as preparedness, I've seen that from the polling results that most of your executives are somewhat prepared. There are not a lot of procrastinators. Most are sort of prepared. They get over the finish line. And a lot of them, that they will be consistently high quality in the customer engagement. So that's the smooth sailing part. That's really good. I'm going to go to Naomi, since she's a coach.
We did get a question, if you want to maybe answer that before we pass it over to Naomi. Yeah, you can say it, I can read it. What's the best way to measure a change in trust from before to after the briefing? And when and how do you measure it? So post surveys, bad response rates to see. So basically, yeah. So a change in trust from before and after the briefing, and how do you measure it?
Okay, if it's a change in trust internally, you can do internal surveys with your sales leaders, with your sales teams, and with the executives who are involved. And I think it's a good idea to do that. Many programs do external surveys, but don't internally survey the salespeople. And I think you could see the reading improve, hopefully, over time, and it'd be good to do an internal survey. Does that answer the question?
May I add one more thing, Pam?
Yeah, please.
I think surveys are great. I would also suggest deeper conversations. Almost think about it this as interviews. we often would follow up with sales teams after and just ask them about not, you know, a quantitative response, but what's happened. And we took that and sort of coded that into something that could be measured. So as opposed to saying, hey, you know, because we know the survey problem, there's a trigger response problem, but getting deeper answers and then again, talking to multiple folks in the account team to ask about what's happened. I mean, literally, how did things go after? What kinds of stuff did the customer share with you? What were the next engagements like? Those point to changes. It's not perfect. It's not precise, but it can often tell more than a quantitative metric.
Debriefing is good, and I know a lot of programs do take the time to do that, so I would encourage that as well.
There are two things that I've seen done, and I may just add from a more quantitative perspective. One thing in our evaluations that we use after the training, the question that we ask, there are two questions in a row, and it says on a scale of 0 to 100, so that we have a little bit broader spectrum to play with. Rate your self-confidence in presenting, opening a briefing, leading a sales discussion before this training. Rate your confidence after this training. So there's a number that is, because sometimes if you just say on a scale of 1 to 5 before and a scale of 1 to 5 after, they're not even really thinking about what they answered before, and you could see a decline. But if we're really trying to get quantitative information, that is the two numbers sitting next to each other, and they rated their confidence at 50% before and at 100% after, or 50 and 100, you have 100% increase. So you can actually show a metric of movement of the needle. The other thing that I've seen done at ABPM was when we were at, I believe it was in New York City for a spring conference, we went to see NCR. And the gentleman who was running the NCR program had us, before we walked in, he said, he put up a flip chart or a whiteboard and said, tell me what you think of when you think of NCR. And all of the words that we used were, you know, legacy and, you know, history and very kind of stern and buttoned up and technical. And then we experienced his briefing program. And then when we left, the last exercise he had us do was, what do you think of when you think of NCR? And all of our words were far more, wow, oh, wow, who knew, we didn't realize, and innovative and different and extra from what they had been in that first very vanilla experience. So he invited the feedback from us verbally, where each of us were providing that input and kind of lifting the boats and the experience of all.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great perspective too. So if we've covered that question, I'm happy to go on to the next one. I'm going to start with you, Naomi. How do you ensure that executives are properly prepped for briefings, properly coached? Is it just a prep document? Is it a one-on-one? Is it a prep document and a one-on-one? How do you know that they're really prepared? And what are your tips for coaching executives? We don't train executives, we coach them, right?
Yeah, often. And I think that the classic consultant's response is that depends. I think all executives and frankly, all salespeople respond to 3 cookies. They are time, they are degree of difficulty, and win rate. So time is, did it take me very much time to prepare? Degree of difficulty was, could I do it easily? Was it a slog? And win rate is, did it work? So the more we can work with them in an adrenaline event scenario where there is something that really matters and we can help them prepare easily and quickly, and they have an immediate ROI that they won this compared to anybody else, and their audience gives them the feedback, that is absolutely positive. So we can do that in a number of different ways, both in training and in coaching.
That's great. I always used to like to ask executives, how would you like to be briefed? We had some who said, A prep document is enough for me unless it's a strategic account. Then have the sales team schedule a one-on-one or whatever. But I think you need to ask each executive that you use on a regular basis, how and when would you like to be briefed? How do we get that scheduled? And then you can serve up to the executive what they need to be fully equipped for that customer engagement. Andy, do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree with you completely on that, Pam. Over time we developed and iterated on formats, especially for our CEO, what he would use. And we learned not just what he wanted, because that's what we could get directly, but then what we'd look back then at what actually got used out of that. And if it was a page-long thing and we found that the only stuff that he'd talk about in a briefing was what we put in the first into the first question, we focused on that and stopped spending so much time to Naomi's point about degree of difficulty. Like we wanted to make it easy for ourselves and effective for the leaders. So it's as much about what they tell you they want as observing how they use it and what actually works.
Mm-hmm. Naomi, have you experienced executives who just had a script? They would be prepped by sales teams, but they still did their own thing every time.
Yes, absolutely.
If so, they need coaching from you.
But I think, if we unpack, if we back this all up, the question that arises is, what do we do with the one that isn't doing what we want them to do, right? I think in a perfect world, everybody's on the high end of that spectrum that we were asking for, that if they, I don't mean to brag, but they're always flawlessly prepared. But if they aren't always flawlessly prepared, I think one of the things that is a great asset, I'm going to drop into chat the discussion leader self-assessment. And this is something that you could just do for all people who are discussion leaders, but also specifically to executives or specifically to salespeople. Keep this thing short. I've got a couple of pages of sample questions. And when we're talking about, does your audience understand what you're talking about? Do they see value in what you're talking about? And do they trust you enough to make a business decision and take action? So we've kind of divided these questions into those categories. But if you think about what you're trying to do in your briefing program, whether it's your mission, your agenda, are we customizing and tailoring to meet the needs of our clients, which is what the ABPM goals are telling us every year. Ask those questions and ask on a spectrum of strongly agree to strongly disagree or always to never. And if they're anything less than always all the way across the board, it is your opportunity to go back to them and discreetly say, look, I saw in your self-assessment that you invited a little bit of feedback on this key area, and we're here to serve you and support you in what you need. So then we go back to, what is the briefing document that Andy prepared? How do we get that succinct enough? And what kind of coaching and training do you need?
Mm-hmm. I remember in the beginning of the virtual world, there were some senior executives who were a little, they weren't sure how to behave virtually. They were great at being in person, but they even admitted that they could use a little bit of help. So at that time, the company I worked with hired Mandel, because Mandel had come up with a virtual briefing for executives coaching. And so we were able to bring in Mandel to coach VPs and above. And there were probably about 10 who signed up for this. And after that, they had the confidence they needed to continue to participate and not be shy in virtual briefings. So sometimes it's good to ask. And if an executive takes you aside and says, I think I need some help, then that's your open opportunity to find out what kind of coaching they need. Going back to the post-briefing survey template, if anyone out there in the audience has one that they're using and you want to drop it in chat for the rest of the participants to see, this would be a post-briefing survey for sales or internal people. If you have one with 5 or 8 questions, please feel free to share it or let us know. Good. And are there any other questions as we're moving along? or comments or ideas to share?
Pam, one of the things that you just mentioned, and thank you for the endorsement of the work that we did with executives in the beginning of the pandemic. I think what we're seeing has flipped, that people have gotten actually pretty used to sitting in a box and communicating with an audience that we are feeling kind of safe and in our safe zone and our comfort zone. Where people are telling us that they're rusty, or where our briefing community is observing the rustiness, is back in person, where we don't have the Post-it notes stuck to our monitor, or we don't have all of the things that we have now as a safety net in the comfort of our remote operation. So we are seeing a lot of ask for, hey, can you get us ready, revisit the things that we need to do to be in person, all the way down to dinner parties. And we had seen, if anybody has seen the Miro dinner party prep kit that Amanda Lovegren Fellow had put together, I think it's posted on their website. And I can go back. We can find that through ABPM as a resource as well. It's just amazing.
It's
I saw that. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was good. It's like anything, you get rusty if you're not doing it, if you're not using the skills. And now that we're going back to in person more and more, we need to make sure that those skills are, brushed up and ready. Let me go to the next.
We got another question, actually.
Okay,
Is there any tips that you? Yeah, is there any tips that you guys might have on how to get executives in sales to stop talking and to start listening?
I do, and the most important is that we're even opening our briefings with the voice of the customer. So just like that dinner party kit offered, is to equip them in the beginning with, these are the questions that we suggest you find opportunity to use. We would love to have these come from you. I think that's a super powerful, and I'm open to other suggestions that we see bubbling up, of course, in the chat. And Andy.
Yeah, I'll build on that, Naomi. I think as part of prep, whether it's in person or asynchronously, a document, sharing in collaboration with the sales team what the learning goals of the briefing, because it's not just about sales and closing the deal. It's about understanding these customers more deeply to build that relationship over time. And if you highlight a few things, hey, we'd like to learn these things, like over the course of the day, we hope to go deeper in these 3 areas. And those are the highlighted in what you prep folks with. You put people in kind of a learning mindset, hopefully. Again, you can't stop folks, but you can give them every tool in the book to ask questions and to listen, as opposed to feeling like they have to fill the silence.
Also, having a good facilitator, an objective third party in your briefing, can help steer more towards the customer and less toward the executive who is presenting to the customer. Actually, they should be leading a discussion, not presenting to the customer. The day of standing behind a podium and speaking out like it's a TED Talk, that's been over for a long time in executive briefings and customer engagements. And so I think facilitation really can help with the navigation of the discussion and improvement of customer listening skills. Maybe more executives should take a voice of the customer training. Well, I should say coaching.
You slipped up there, Pam. What do you
slipped up. I know. Well, great. All right. So let's move on to how to get executives more involved. And that is not just coming to speak to clients. We want them to do that on a consistent basis, but are they investing in your team in terms of team development? When you say you need training, is there funding for that? Is there support for that? Are they talking about you, as I said before, at all hands? Are they taking part in your presenter recognition? Are they motivating sales leadership to motivate their teams to utilize your program? There are many different ways that executives need to get involved besides coming to the briefing program and presenting all the time. So what is your position on that? Andy, how do you encourage your executives and leaders of the organizations to be involved in the steering committee, for instance, or an advisory committee if you have that?
Well, the number one thing is to actually invite them, to ask them. I mean, not just to briefings, but I think being specific with folks and giving them a reason why. So that means not just a blanket, I'm going to email all the VPs saying, hey, will you please be a part of this? But thinking strategically about the folks that you've worked with, that you know, and what you know about them and their teams, and making customized asks that make sense given their role in the organization. So it's not enough just to say, hey, please promote us at all hands. Or please get involved in X, Y, or Z. It's, hey, we'd love for you to do this. And here's why it would make a difference. I'll give an example. We at one point I had a very, very engaged, very collaborative CIO, and a team below, in his organization that was also very, very engaged with the briefing program. They saw the value in what we did, and so they advocated to that CIO to do that, to do more things, and he came to events. He made a point to do that because the folks on his team saw it more directly as well as he did. So he was getting it from multiple sides. Plus, it was somebody who we could just email and invite. Making it in their interest, understanding their interests. That goes back to that listening and not talking. This time it's the briefing program listening, and paying attention to things about what motivates them, and using that is helpful. And then finally, making it easy for them. So if you invite someone to participate in an event, say a speaker, a discussion leader recognition. See, I almost slipped up there. Giving them talking points, giving them stories to tell. Like, here's some things, if you participate, here are things, that might be appropriate to discuss. So in summary, just ask them. People just like to be invited. Make it easy and make it in their interest.
Right. Additionally, you can have, I used to have every 6 months an EBC summit with the executive staff. And of course, we talked about results and shared metrics, shared challenges with the program, maybe not enough demand, too much demand, not enough sales participation, whatever it was. And they would help collaborate and brainstorm solutions with us. That was a great way to get executives involved. They need to be in the know. And like I say, they're not always in all of your briefings. They're busy people, and they're meeting with customers individually, sometimes off-site. So it's really important to keep them up to date. And again, to have one-on-ones, lean in. Don't be afraid to schedule even a 15-minute one-on-one with any of your senior executives, maybe on a quarterly basis, so they can hear from you, not just your boss, who may go to senior leader meetings and you don't get to go. You can ask through the executive assistant or the chief of staff if you can have a 15-minute with a given executive and update him or her on what you're doing. And you'd be surprised, there are people who will say, how can I be involved? How can I help you? I'm really proud of your program and the work that you're doing and the impact that it's having on business. So there are many different ways to, I think, encourage executives to be more involved. Naomi, any thoughts on that as well?
I say carry on.
Carry on. Okay. All right.
We have a question, not in the chat, but are you guys seeing briefing centers, including like housekeeping rules such as like bathroom emergency exits, etc., like during their briefings? Are you guys seeing that at all? Still.
One thing that we're seeing particularly in government or energy sector or a number of other industries where the emergency exits are, that is absolutely mandatory safety moment starting every meeting, internal or external. And definitely want to support and reinforce the urgency of that, even if you aren't doing it. I think going back to what Pam said about facilitation, that typically is the role of the facilitator, so that elevates the responsibility of others in the room.
Mhm. I see comments from Rebecca. Rebecca works, I think, for a government contractor, and I'm sure you would do that as part of your opening statement. And manufacturing, Trisha Walsh says that they're doing it too. And I know there are certain accounts in the past where safety and security was a must, and so we would include a statement like that. Some housekeeping isn't a bad idea. It makes people become comfortable with your environment and comfortable with you. So I think that's a good thing to do.
I think also the fine line that you're walking is to set the context of the meeting and up-level your opening and then say where the ladies' room is, so that you're not putting yourself in a role that appears to be
role.
hospitality. Yes,
definitely. You want to be careful. We used to, in the old days, focus a lot on those kinds of things, where the coffee was and where the bathrooms are. Just be careful. If you're the facilitator, you have an established role, so you can work this into it, but you might not want to lead everything with, well, this is how you walk down the hall to get to the restroom. And I see Yost is saying that may be more common in the US, less in Europe. I guess you're on your own, right, Yost? No, it's good. It's great to see everybody in chat giving their perspectives and their ideas as well. So how, in terms of the sales engagement, we were talking about, how do you inform sales teams of the offerings you have so they better utilize your program? What are some of the ways that you let salespeople know that your program is high performing, it gets business results, and that they should be using it and not trying to go around your program to have customer meetings on their own? Andy, any thoughts about that?
In one role, I had the opportunity to do a couple different, to do one thing, and then we created our own opportunities for a second thing. The opportunity that we were given was to be a part of sales onboarding, and we had a time slot during a week-long session for all customer-facing folks that were joining the company, and we gave a short presentation about the program, and then actually led tours of the center. Fortunately, the learning area was adjacent to our center, so that was super convenient. And that gave us two things. One, that broadcast of telling everyone a little bit, just so they had it in the back of their mind, but it also often created some immediate connections and advocates, folks who, because it wasn't just people who had just joined 5 minutes ago that were going through this orientation. It was sometimes took a few months. So folks already had some customer relationships, and we would get questions like, "Hey, I didn't realize you guys existed. How can I do this for this customer?" And we figured out how to work with them right away. The piece that we created was a demand generation activity for all sales teams. So our program divided things up regionally, and we made a point to create one-to-one connections with frontline, not salespeople, but the frontline managers, and going to various meetings and the cadence usually once a quarter or less, but enough to give updates and a couple stories about recent wins. And if we had a salesperson, an account team that was in that area that could share a win and share their experience, and how a recent briefing helped them, we actually put them front and center when we had the opportunity to go to those meetings. So again, it wasn't us saying how great we were and how great our program was, but it was an internal customer saying, "Here's how this helped me make money," for lack of a better term. And that's what piqued the interest of their colleagues. And there's nothing better than having a colleague tell you, you're going to be someone you work with day to day. You're going to trust more than me as run the briefing program, talking about how, why you should use us. So that was super powerful. And from those, we got invited to more things and got invited to other sales training opportunities. It was just a matter of kickstarting it with the right folks.
Right. And that's all about building trust. The more trust you build, the more they will come. That's what I found. The reputation of the program depends on how you work with your sales teams and your sales leadership. And that is a way of equipping them for success. So I like that idea as well. When in terms of equipping executives, it's really important to share with them, and they should know these, who the strategic accounts are, the targeted accounts, and how do you incentivize executives who are very busy to participate in these strategic account engagements. Naomi, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it is a very good idea to have meetings with those executives and talk to them about very early, right? Everybody wants us to start earlier. So if you can speak with them earlier, here's what we've heard from the team about the 5 key strategic accounts we're in pursuit of. What is your level of interest in being involved in any or all? And then holding them to that, equipping them early, right? Saying that we know that in the first quarter, we're going to be having an account review with this account. How like on a scale of 1 to 5, how ready are you for it? Are you prepared? Will you be? Do you want to be? Are you available for it? And then staying in contact regarding that. So the earliest that you can be communicating with them about those strategic priorities that they've identified as best.
Especially if they're an executive sponsor for a given account, even though they may be familiar with it, they should not come into a customer engagement and wing it. They need to be super prepared, and letting them know that you're working with the executive engagement team or the executive sponsorship team is really important. Executives want to know that the briefing team is connected to the executive sponsor program. So if you're not, it's really important to reach out to the person who's managing the executive sponsorship program and start having regular meetings with them. They'll also tell you how to equip leadership for these customer engagements. They'll tell you again how they want to be prepped and what you need to know as an executive briefing team leader about that account. So everybody's on the same page.
Hey, I'll add to that. The staying connected to the customer advocacy or customer reference team is important. Not because it directly, but over time, what happens is more case studies, more references happen through the briefing program, and case studies that talk about an engagement that involved an EBC can be helpful to the program in a second degree, and executives see those things, the big premier assets that team creates that get used at all hands in annual conferences. Executives for sure see those, and it'd be great if stories that start or are moved forward as part of your program are featured in those, because you can, even if they don't say EBC, folks know, where things happened, and the account teams, the people involved. It's just one more touch point, one more place to see how your program has an impact on customers.
Most definitely. I see a question out there. What if an executive doesn't participate, but is then upset about a launch of some kind? Well, then I would schedule a meeting with that executive and hear his or her perspective, and then ask them, how would you like to have participated? We could have used your support. The launch would have been more successful if we'd had your support. We just didn't realize. And so if you can build a relationship with that particular executive, then next time he or she will be included. They can share their perspective in advance and everybody will be aligned.
In the military, they call it an after-action review, and there are forms that you can find online especially for the one that, yeah, right, exactly, Jenny. Maybe they need some therapy if they've ignored the emails and the meetings, etc. And if you hate to have it be a trailing indicator, right, instead of a leading indicator, that we need to unpack this after it went wrong. And we recognize them as the leading resource. This matters very much to them. And when we do this next time, here are the 3 criteria that we will follow based on your input, and continue to have those conversations with them.
Correct. Executives have personas, but they also have personalities. And if you understand the personality types of your senior executives, then you can work with that. If anybody's familiar with the Enneagram, 9 different personality types. Is your executive the challenger, the investigator, the helper, the peacemaker? Knowing that type of the personality type can also help you collaborate better with executives. With that, I think we're about 45 minutes into our conversation. I have no more questions to ask. If the audience has any questions of us, we're here. But this has been a fun conversation, and it's really good for me to hear the perspective of people like Andy, who've managed programs for years and is now a consultant, to hear from Naomi, who's been coaching executives for years, to hear what she's hearing also from her clients. That's been really helpful to me. So I've learned a lot just by co-hosting with Allie, having this opportunity. Is there anything that we haven't answered that we should answer, Allie?
I think all of the, we've answered all of the questions that have been asked, and I think we're wrapping it up.
I'd love to lob in an advocacy for compassion for all of your speakers, especially your executives and your salespeople, and realize that they're human and they want to be successful. This is that fine line between visibility and exposure. We always like to use the word exposure, saying, oh, this is all this great exposure for you. But in the military, the word exposure is risk. It is not a safe thing to have. So we want them in control of their personal brand and of the organization's personal brand. And you can equip them in a myriad of ways. I think that there have been some really, really great ideas that have been raised today.
Yes, and thank you to the participants for sharing what you knew with everyone. I see somebody has an idea for a post survey. Someone was asking about that, and I think we have a program who's going to provide that. So this has been a good opportunity to share with one another out there, and we really appreciate that. Makes our job easier.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to thank everybody. Andy, you were great. Naomi too, and Allie. Thank you so much, and all the participants. And I'll turn it back over to Allie.
I was going to say the same thing. Thank you everybody for joining, and obviously our co-hosts and panelists. We appreciate your knowledge and your valuable insights that you provided to all of us. You guys are a great lineup. So with that being said, this is our last UpLevel webinar of the year. We're not going to be having one in December, so we hope that you guys will join next year once we finalize our industry buzzing topics that are in the works right now. So if any of you also are interested in hearing about a certain topic, please feel free to reach out. We do love recommendations. I can't preface that enough. So if you guys have anything you'd like us to discuss in our 2024 lineup, please reach out. Until then, I just want to wish everybody a wonderful Thanksgiving and a happy holiday season. It's coming around. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Andy. Thanks, Naomi, Pam.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.